Hello, it's me. Have you received the divorce paper yet? This call came 10 days after my husband suddenly disappeared. I won't be coming back anymore. I want you to submit the divorce papers I sent. I'm planning to remarry soon, so please do it quickly. I recently received a sealed envelope containing the completed divorce papers. Where are you now? What are you planning to do about Rachel? Even if we are getting divorced, we need to meet and talk. Dad and Mr. Jackson are worried about you. At that moment, my husband burst into laughter. I'm tired of being considerate towards your father and the boss. If I stay there, I'm going to have to be petty for the rest of my life, right? I'm sick and tired of it. I'm not your slave, you know. I was shocked. I never thought my husband felt that way. I'm not coming back. I'm not afraid even if I lose my job. A business partner has recognized my abilities and offered me a job. I can finally live a free life. As I grew increasingly despairing, my husband's voice was incredibly cheerful. Then, a woman's voice came on the phone. Madame, please forgive us. Our love is real. Please don't look for us. I'm pregnant. Shocked, I then heard my husband deliver the final blow. That's how it is, so I'm sorry, but I don't need Rachel. Take care. Even after the call ended, I couldn't move for a while. I don't need Rachel. What? My hands were trembling. Even if God forgives my husband, I will never forgive him. I called my father, gripped the voice recorder tightly, and ran towards Mr. Jackson's company. My name is Emily, 34 years old. I work as an architect in my family's construction business. I have a family of 3 with my husband Brian, who is a year older than me, and our 4-year-old daughter Rachel. Our family home, which has been running a construction business for generations, is just a 5-minute walk from our house. When I grow up, I'll be an architect. I'll design and you build it, Dad. Sure, if Emily designs it, I'll build the best house. Working with my daughter would make me the happiest man. My dream has always been to be an architect since elementary school. As I grew up, the desire to work at my family's business faded, and I went to an architecture school far from my hometown. After graduation, I joined a housing manufacturer, gained practical experience, and obtained my first-class architect license. About 3 years into my career, I recognized a familiar face among the salespeople who visited the company. Excuse me, aren't you Mr. Brian? I used to work at the restaurant in N Hotel. Huh? Oh, Emily? Did you really become an architect? Brian, my husband, worked at the same part-time job for 2 years during college, though we attended different universities. Being a rare female aspiring architect, I was quite remembered, and it seems he remembered me too. We immediately hit it off with old stories and exchanged contact information, deciding to go out for a meal later. His company, a general trading company dealing with construction materials, had become our sales representative 6 months ago. Although we never really talked while working part-time, I found out that he was more fun than I expected. After several dinners together, he asked me out, and 2 years later, he proposed. We went to see my family to introduce Brian. My parents and brother welcomed him joyfully, and Brian seemed relieved. We had no plans for a wedding ceremony, but my father pleaded, even a small one, but please have it in our hometown. Reluctantly, we agreed. My father shed tears of joy, and that night turned into a celebration with nearby relatives. Sorry, my dad was a bit pushy about it. No, it's fine. Your dad's great. I could really see how much your family loves you. My parents were toxic. I'm envious. On the way back by the car, Brian hesitantly talked about his family. During our relationship, he rarely spoke about his family. My family home is gone now. My mom passed away 5 years ago, and my dad went back to his hometown. My sister is already married and lives in another state. Huh? We're going to see your father, right? Yeah, I've reserved a place near where my dad lives. I'm planning to invite my sister there too. My father-in-law used to get drunk and violent at home from Brian's childhood. He would yell and sometimes hit his mother. Although he was diligent at work, he'd start drinking as soon as he got home. My mother-in-law never left him, and she eventually passed away due to her chronic illness. Mom always cares about what Dad thinks. We were always secondary. I don't have any memories of being loved by my parents. That's terrible. That's why I'll never be like my father. I will definitely make you happy. His words of determination warmed my heart. When we finally met my father-in-law, he was surprisingly small and quiet. However, he seemed restless and eager to leave early. Congratulations on your marriage. Sorry, but I don't have any money and I don't want to be bothered, so don't bother inviting me to any wedding. My father-in-law's indifferent words made it seem like he had no interest in his son's marriage. My sister-in-law looked down apologetically. I understand. We're not planning to have a wedding ceremony, so don't worry. Although we intended to talk about the wedding ceremony, Brian didn't seem to want to bring it up anymore. He smiled, but his voice sounded very sad. I gently gripped his hand under the table. His hand, gripping mine back, was cold and trembled slightly. At that moment, I vowed to myself to make Brian happy and to be his greatest supporter. After getting married, I discovered Brian had a peculiar habit. Brian is not good with change and tends to run away from reality by leaving home when he is mentally distressed. There have been 2 significant incidents that stood out to me. The first incident happened about half a year after we got married. At that time, Brian had been transferred to a different department and was struggling with the unfamiliar work. One day, he came home later than usual, unusually cheerful and drunk. Emily, sorry, I quit my job. What? Are you drunk? Surprised, I asked him, and he just laughed it off, waving his hands dismissively. Yeah, I quit. I can't do that kind of work anymore. I can't. Saying this cheerfully, he then collapsed onto the sofa and immediately fell asleep, snoring. I was anxious, unable to tell if he was joking or serious. However, the next day, hangover, he confirmed that he had indeed quit his job. 2 days later, without any warning, he just left the house. I tried contacting him numerous times, but there was no response. When I finally decided to consult my sister-in-law, she casually said, "It happens often. Just leave him alone." Eventually, he returned home as if nothing had happened. Sorry, with the marriage and the department change, it was mentally tough. I needed some time alone to calm down, but I'm okay now. I was so worried. Please rely on me more when you're struggling. We're husband and wife, right? Yeah, I understand. Sorry. Looking back, there was also a time just before our wedding when I couldn't reach Brian. Maybe he was escaping reality due to the stress back then too. When anxious, he seemed to need time alone to sort out his feelings. Later, he was diagnosed with depression at the hospital after being considerably affected at work. Financially, we were stable since I was working, but the uncertainty of Brian's sudden departure always left me anxious. My mother had been my confidant, and one day my father made a suggestion. "Hello, I heard from your mom. How about you and Brian come back here for a while? A change of environment might be good. We are here to support and watch over you both." The kindness in my father's words, after all the worry I had been through alone, warmed my heart. When I told Brian, he responded positively. "It might be better than staying here." Thinking of Brian, I decided to quit the company I had worked at for 6 years and return to my hometown. When we moved back, my dad had already found us a rental house near our family home. I took some time off work on going walks and drives to local tourist spots with Brian. Being in a nature-rich area, he seemed to gradually regain his spirits. One day, while having dinner at my parents' house, my father said, "Brian, you used to work in building material sales, right? I know someone who's looking for a salesperson. Would you be interested in trying out?" "Really? If I can, I would love to. Thank you." My husband's eyes sparkled with the prospect of returning to work. My dad, delighted, immediately called Mr. Jackson of the building materials store. "He's got time tomorrow. Let's go together and talk to him." "Wait, Dad, why are you coming too?" My dad was probably worried, but Brian seemed more at ease with him accompanying us. The next day, he returned from the interview in high spirits. "I'm home. I start working there next week. It seems like a really family-friendly and comfortable place." "Mr. Jackson is a nice guy, right? Take it easy and learn the job at your own pace." Both the boss and your dad said the same thing. "Everyone is so nice here. I'm really glad we moved." Seeing Brian regain his happiness made me incredibly joyful. He became brighter and more cheerful as he started working. Everyone knew about his depression diagnosis, so they were kind and considerate, but most importantly, he enjoyed his work. You know, I think the countryside suits me better. Everyone's kind and things are going well with their clients. Maybe this is where my talents really flourish. What talent? The talent of being a capable salesman, of course. I was heartened to see him joking like that. When the time felt right, I also returned to work at my family's business. A year later, I found out I was pregnant, and Brian and my parents were overjoyed. Everything seemed to be going well. Then, a second shocking incident happened. Brian left for work and never came back. His phone seemed to be off, unreachable. Again, that was my honest feeling. How many times will this happen? I was angry that he left without a word, and I felt a sense of worthlessness. And now, with a baby in my belly, in a panic, I called Mr. Jackson, and his response surprised me. "Huh? He's been off work for the last 4 days. I thought you guys were going somewhere." "Huh? Oh, I see. Sorry." Unexpectedly, this time he had properly informed his workplace. It might be different this time. Trusting Brian, I waited, and he returned after the holiday with a charm for a safe childbirth. Sorry, I was happy about the pregnancy, but when I thought about our family growing, I suddenly got scared. But I'm okay now. I've made up my mind. Seriously? You should at least call or message me. What would you have done if I had a miscarriage from worrying too much? I cried in relief, and Brian apologized repeatedly. My pregnancy must have felt like a huge responsibility to him. He shared his fears about becoming a parent, not knowing what parental love feels like. Though I may not fully understand his anxieties, I strongly felt that we should overcome them together. After our daughter Rachel was born, Brian seemed completely settled and stopped leaving home unexpectedly. He made friends through work and started going out more after work and on weekends. I'm going fishing with Eric from work tomorrow. I'll be leaving in the middle of the night, so can't you just prepare some sandwiches for me? Huh? Weren't we supposed to go to the zoo with Rachel tomorrow? What are you going to do about that promise? Oh, I forgot about that. Sorry, but I can't cancel now. Can you go with your mom and dad instead? As Rachel grew older, Brian increasingly prioritized hanging out with his friends. You are Rachel's father. Sorry. I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of commitments. Everyone likes me. Maybe living in the countryside really suits me. His overconfidence was evident in such mistaken beliefs. However, I felt he was deliberately avoiding spending time with Rachel, using his busy schedule as an excuse. Brian's behavior became noticeably strange about 3 months ago. He started going out more frequently after work and on weekends. He often broke promises with Rachel, leading to frequent arguments between us. You are really annoying. Rachel is too young to remember promises. Just accept that my socializing is part of my job. Children aren't stupid. You'll regret this someday. Yeah. The kind and gentle husband I knew before was gone. Recently, he even started making excuses to avoid family gatherings at my parents' house. I couldn't imagine why this was happening. This continued until one Sunday morning. When I woke up, Brian was already gone. On the living room table, there was a note. Please don't look for me. Thank you for everything. Panicked, I tried calling him repeatedly, but he never answered. I felt oddly despairing. This time, it wasn't just another incident. For the first time, he left without saying a word to me. This was not something to be happy about. I felt like I saw Brian's determination in that note, and all I could do was cry out loud. On Monday, I went with my father to visit Mr. Jackson's company. It seemed Brian hadn't shown up for work. I haven't heard anything about him taking leave or quitting. He was working normally on Friday, but what? Mr. Jackson hesitated, looking uncomfortable. Please stay calm. A new female employee who was absent without notice along with Brian has also been missing since yesterday. His unexpected words made me gasp. Did Brian say anything to you the day before he disappeared? Huh? I panicked for a moment. The day before? What was it? Did he say anything important? He seemed cheerful while having his evening drink and was talking about something. He was saying something about how cute the new girl at work was compared to me. My father sighed deeply. You're usually so level-headed, but you become completely clueless about your own matters. If Brian calls again, it will be good to record it. Hearing this, Mr. Jackson slapped his knee. Oh, I have the perfect thing for that. a high-quality voice recorder we use for important meetings. I was somewhat pushed into taking the voice recorder. I didn't think Brian would call, but if he did, indeed, I might get flustered and not remember what was said. There might be some hint hidden in his words. Indeed, after calming down at home, I remembered what Brian had said the day before he disappeared. The new girl at work is just 20, really pure and cute. I think I'm the type who can succeed in the countryside. I want to start life over again with someone like her. So, Brian had clearly talked about his plans for the future the day before, smirking at my reaction. Since then, I practiced recording calls with the voice recorder, preparing for whenever he might call next. This time, I wouldn't miss his true intentions. 10 days later, a call from Brian came. My heart raced. Calm down, calm down. I switched the call to speaker mode and started recording just as I had practiced. Hello, it's me. Have you received the divorce papers yet? Hearing Brian's voice for the first time in 10 days sounded like he was taunting me for being so exhausted. Where are you? Leaving just a letter like that? I was worried. Sorry. I'm not coming back anymore. I need you to file the divorce papers that I sent you. I'm planning to remarry soon, so please do it quickly. Recently, an envelope containing the completed divorce papers arrived. It seemed this man had no guilt towards the life we had shared or towards our daughter. To me, it felt like my daughter and I were just discarded toys to him. I bit my lip and spoke more firmly. Where are you? What are you planning to do about Rachel? Even if we are getting divorced, we need to meet and talk. Dad and Mr. Jackson are worried about you. The moment I said that, Brian burst into laughter. I'm tired of being considerate towards your father and the boss. If I stay there, I'm going to have to be petty for the rest of my life, right? I'm sick and tired of it. I'm not your slave, you know. I was shocked. I never knew Brian had such thoughts. I have tried to be considerate about living in a place where he doesn't know anyone, but have I made him feel trapped? I'm not coming back. I'm not afraid of getting fired. A client has recognized my abilities and offered me a job. I can finally live a free life. As I became increasingly desperate, Brian's voice was incredibly cheerful. Then a woman's voice came on the phone. Madame, please forgive us. Our love is real. Please don't look for us. I'm pregnant. What? Shocked by this revelation, Brian then delivered the final blow. That's how it is. So I'm sorry, but I don't need Rachel. You can raise her on your own, right? Take care. Even after the call ended, I couldn't move for a while. He doesn't need Rachel. My hands were trembling. Even if God forgives Brian, I will never forgive him. I called my father, gripped the voice recorder tightly, and ran towards Mr. Jackson's company. Since Brian left, I had been reflecting on our 7 years of marriage. There was something both of us had never realized. I'm the complete opposite of my dad. Brian always said that, and I believed it too, but perhaps they were similar in their mental weakness. What Brian is doing now is no different from what his father did when he drank and became violent. He is trying to alleviate his accumulated anxieties and frustrations by abandoning us. With these thoughts, I arrived at Mr. Jackson's company, where my father and the parents of the missing Sarah were waiting in the president's office. Emily, these are Sarah's parents. We'd like you to let them hear the recording as well. I understand the feelings of parents worry about their missing daughter. The woman, who was rumored to be the other woman, was thought to be serious and naive. Given her age of 20, it might have been Sarah's first romance. I'm sorry for my daughter's behavior. She was always just a serious girl. Sarah's parents, with pale faces, bowed their heads in apology, and I bowed in return. I'm sorry, too, for my husband's actions. This might be shocking for you, but with that introduction, I played the record phone call for everyone to hear. When Sarah's voice came on, her father slapped his thigh in frustration. That naive fool! I'll drag her back home if I have to. Sarah's father was furious, turning red with anger, while her mother collapsed in tears upon learning of the pregnancy. He mentioned a client. I'll check with the contacts he was handling. Mr. Jacob called Brian's clients, but none of them knew anything about the story he had mentioned. The person in charge might be cooperating with him, so I'll inquire higher up. Probably one of these big branches, right? My father had always been a people person, easily making friends with anyone, regardless of seniority, since his student days. Especially among business owners, his network was surprisingly extensive. Don't underestimate the power of rural networks. In about an hour, we discovered the client Brian was referring to, which branch he was supposed to be employed at, and where he was living were quickly identified. Needless to say, by the end of the day, the employment offer to Brian was withdrawn. That night, a panicked call came from him. What did you do? I just got a call saying the employment offer is off. Huh? I didn't do anything. But maybe finding a job around there might be difficult now. Why? The place where the two eloped was over 2 hours away by car, yet still in the same state. You said it yourself, didn't you? The countryside has close-knit and warm connections. But what happens when you turn those connections into enemies? You understand, right? Anyway, come back once with Sarah. Then we'll talk. The next day, as promised, Brian returned to Mr. Jackson's office with Sarah. He looked down with an odd expression on his face, a far cry from the phone call the other day. Brian, I'm really disappointed in you. You've been offered and you're fired, just like you wanted. I know you said you weren't afraid, but don't think you can work in the same type of business around here. It was almost frightening to watch the normally mild-mannered Mr. Jackson speak so nonchalantly with the face of a business manager beside me. Brian's lips trembled and he seemed unable to say anything. It wasn't just your ability to get things going well over here. My dad and the others put in the groundwork to protect you. Don't get wrong. As I said this, I was so frustrated that it had come to this that tears began to well up in my eyes. Then, a little later, Sarah's parents came running in. Dad! You idiot! Sarah rushes back to hide behind Brian's back. He also spreads his hands out protectively and begins to plead with Sarah's parents. She is pregnant. Please don't be rough with her. I am also inadvertently hurt by the way he acts like a man. I don't know if I can give my daughter to a man who would so easily abandon his own child. Sarah, do you understand? He is the kind of man who would abandon a young child. You will be abandoned sooner or later. I will never allow you to marry such a man. No, Dad. We love each other. Brian left his family for me. I'll marry him for sure. Mr. Jackson's and my father stopped Sarah's father from trying to hit Sarah. The father's face was flushed so red that his veins stood out, and his anger was tremendous. You fell in love with a devilish man who abandoned his family without a second thought, eloped with him, and now you're pregnant? You've got to be kidding me. The way the father speaks to her as if he is shouting is heartbreaking as the same parent. Beside him, Sarah's mother is shedding tears. I have so many things I want to say to Brian. Brian, you always said you hate your father, right? That he hurt your mom and never showed you love as a child. Aren't you just like him now? Brian frowned, not seeming to understand what I was saying, and retorted, What? I'm nothing like my dad. I don't drink and get violent. Don't compare me to that low life. I care about Sarah, and I love our baby. But you said you don't need Rachel. You hurt your wife and don't give love to your child, Rachel, right? Brian froze with a huff. Then he instantly understood what I was trying to say and started shaking as if hurt. It's me who's hurt hearing him talk about loving his affair partner and their unborn baby. Me like my father? Yes, you and your father are essentially the same. Weak and cowardly scumbags. Brian looked down and seemed to be stunned and thinking about something for a while. Then he started mumbling to himself. I thought I could live as myself here. I felt accepted, praised, and welcomed. I thought I was a capable person when the client offered me a job. Sarah admired me too. Was it all a mistake? His gaze remained on the floor, and he seemed to be organizing his thoughts by putting them into words. A client asked me if I wanted to come to his branch. I thought, I'm a person who can do it. I have been thinking I'm a very capable person. Sarah also complimented me on how great I was, so I got excited. Was it a misunderstanding? At this point, Brian closed his mouth and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He looked as if he had just woken up from a dream. Everyone, Emily's precious family, they accepted me too. He then sat down, clutching his head in realization. Too late to realize now, I screamed internally. Sarah, sorry, maybe I was wrong. Let's call off the elopement. I can't do this. Sarah, shocked by his sudden change of heart, exclaimed, What are you saying now? You said we were meant to be, that you love me. I'm ready to leave everything for you. Let's live somewhere far away, just two of us. But, as Brian hesitated, I answered for him. This man has a weak mental state, can't handle change, and has a habit of escaping reality. If you go to an unfamiliar place, he might just leave you and the baby behind. It's typical behavior for him. Sarah looked at Brian in shock. Then Sarah's mother, who had been silent until now, tearfully pleaded. You deserve to be happy. Happiness can't be built on someone else's unhappiness. Imagine this man leaving you and your baby behind. Brian wouldn't do that. Face reality. Look at his wife right now. Their daughter has been abandoned, and you are complicit in this suffering. But, confronted with her mother's intense words, Sarah finally looked at me. Seeing my exhausted state, she collapsed to her knees, crying. Despite my resentment, watching her parents, I couldn't help but see my grown-up daughter. 20-year-old Sarah. Unbelievably, Brian then turned to me for support. I finally realized it. You were the one who understood and supported me, despite my weakness. I'll break up with her. Please give me another chance. Mr. Jackson, let me work here again. Before I could respond, Sarah stood up and slapped him hard. The sound echoed, and Brian staggered. You finally woke me up. I can't believe I was with such a worthless man. We are breaking up. Expect a claim for alimony and child support. Sarah, though still crying, had a newfound determination in her eyes. She approached and apologized to me. I've done something unforgivable. I'm truly sorry. I will definitely pay the compensation. With that, Sarah left the room, supported by her parents, without looking back at Brian. I really messed up. I shouldn't have gone along with her. From now on, I'll only care about Emily and Rachel. I won't do anything this stupid again. I felt an urge to trample on my desperately pleading Brian's lowered head. You are the worst. You didn't care about how that girl felt, did you? I'm divorcing you. I'll be asking for alimony and child support, so make sure you pay it. Emily, please, Rachel still needs a father, right? Huh? Didn't you always say it would have been better if your father wasn't there? I feel the same. Rachel is better off without a father like you. I yelled out loud, probably saying the last thing Brian wanted to hear. My father then patted his shoulder. The discussion is over. Go back to your hometown. You won't get a decent job around here. I won't forgive someone who hurt my daughter and granddaughter. But that's... Seeing my father's genuinely angry face, Brian realized it was too late for him. If you really want to prove you're different from your father, pay child support properly. I'm really sorry, Emily. I was a fool. Sorry, Rachel. I am sorry. Finally, I felt like I heard sincere regret and apology from Brian. Mr. Jackson and my father helped him stand up and escorted him to the car. He looked at me with sad eyes, silently, as they drove him to the station. The divorce was finalized without much delay. Brian lived in a rented apartment for a while, but eventually moved to the area where his sister lives and seems to be working diligently now. With the alimony for Sarah, he'll likely be busy working for some time. We are a flying distance from my hometown, so we might never meet again. Every month, I receive a letter from Brian with an apology, a report of the child support payment, and a card for Rachel. He has promised to pay child support until the end. I hope he faces his weakness without running away. Sarah later came to apologize with her parents, bringing the alimony. Unfortunately, it seems that Sarah later suffered a miscarriage due to stress. I now understand how painful it is for a mother when her child suffers, she said while crying and apologizing. I decided to forgive her. Sarah is still young. I hope she learns to judge people better and finds happiness in the future. I've returned to my family home and, with my mother's help, I'm balancing work and raising Rachel. We are planning to build a small house nearby, as my brother will eventually live in our family home. My goal is to complete it before Rachel enters middle school. Oh, you're building the house. I'll use my network to make it the best house I can. My father is terrifying to make enemies with, which just shows how deep his love is. I plan to live happily with Rachel, treasuring the relationships with the people around us, without betraying that love.